My name's Alex York and I'm co-founder of Recent Spaces.
My name's Ian Banks and I'm co-founder of Recent Spaces.
We're a London-based architectural and design visualization studio.
We produce beautiful architectural and design visualization,
images, animations and VR tours. I think one of the things that appealed most was that with architectural visualization, you're working on everything from start to finish. With film and TV, fairly often you're only working in the modeling department or the rendering department or lighting. You do your thing and you hand it on and you don't see it again, and you're a name in the credits and you know, you're very proud of that, but it's a very small part of a big process. Whereas with architectural visualization and the related industries, you're really in charge of everything from beginning to end, from the initial brief right through, and you've got creative control right to the end. And that's really satisfying, knowing that you worked on it all from start to finish.
Originally I wanted to get into the visual effects industry or the games industry. But when I first started in architectural visualization, I quickly realized that in this industry you can get involved in all aspects of creating images and animations, and that's what really made me proud of the work that I worked on. It was something that solely I'd produced. So working on something from the design initialization to the final product was really what drew me in.
I think the first ever render was in a package called Bryce 3D, and it was an eye, and I think I was extruding up faces or something on a plane entirely by accident, and put some awful texture on it and hit render, and there it was. And I think I put my name on the bottom, printed it out, ran downstairs, told my parents that I produced this image. And it's a bit of a cliche, but I did know exactly at that point that I wanted to do this for a living. I had no idea that you could, but I knew I wanted to try anyway.
It was on a piece of software called TrueSpace, and at the time I think I loved automobiles, cars and so on. So my first model was a tank, which I'd created with basic primitives. And this tank was just really basically textured. I was on a chrome surface, and I just put a camera in the scene, and that was the first thing I'd rendered.
So my first job out of university was at Hayes Davidson. I was a visualizer there for a few years. I went on to work freelance for various other Viz studios, directly for architects' practices, interior designers. I then formed Atelier York, where I was working purely directly with other interior designers, agencies and so on. And then about a year ago, I co-founded Recent Spaces.
After university, my first job in the industry would have been in a computer games company, where I worked for a company called Coyote Games. They're a small independent games company producing assets for other games companies. I worked there for about a year, and then moved on and worked for another company called Hayes Davidson, which is where I really sort of developed my architectural visualization skills. Stayed there for 4 years and then decided to go freelance to develop a bit more as an artist, learn from other artists around me, and then did that for quite a while. In that time I collaborated with some other studios such as The Boundary more recently, and then having done all of this, I sort of had an itch to start my own studio, which I'd always had. And then earlier this year, joined forces with Alex York, and here we are.
Just having someone to bounce ideas off. I mean, I think during the first couple of weeks, month or so of working with Ian, you know, we were throwing ideas around. You can problem solve super quickly. You know, an issue that you've got, you can come up with ideas, and it's, you know, off the table within minutes, rather than you have to kind of work through it over hours or start looking up tutorials online. You know, the chances are one of us knows the answer to the problem. So you can work through things super quickly. And also, because you've got someone there of a high caliber, they kind of push you on and make you want to do better work all the time, and not accept a kind of average level. You want to bring that average up. So that was hugely productive, really, the first few months in particular. I think one of the most recent ones we worked on, called Primrose Hill, was one of the most satisfying ones for me, because before that I'd worked on one by myself, Seaford Court, and Ian had worked on others. And then Primrose Hill was more of a kind of, we were both working together equally on it, more or less. And there was a lot of creative freedom with how we were going to tackle the animation. And I remember sitting down saying, we want to put something a bit different into this one. So we went to the next level in detail, stuff that we'd never done before, including animated dust in the air. There's a little Easter egg in the animation actually with there's an animated clock which no one has noticed yet, but we know it's there and we're pleased with it. You'd know it if it wasn't there, it wouldn't look right. But we spent a lot of time on the tiny details, and actually when you look at it as a whole, it comes together nicely. So that was a really satisfying job.
I think probably a project we did recently called Pied à Terre. It's a very small apartment, but it's a project that we've gone back to time and time again to test out different methods, whether it be animations, still images, and more recently virtual reality. There's a couple of really great shots in it, and because it's a studio flat, it's a tight space, so it allows for great compositions.
I think forming recent spaces, co-forming it, it's great to have an extremely coherent and striking design and brand for the studio, and it took us a long time to put that all together, and I think hopefully the results show, and we're already getting a reputation with our old clients and new ones as well. So I'd say, yeah, forming a new company.
My proudest moment so far would be starting Recent Spaces. It's been a long-term goal of mine. Recently realised it this year with Alex York, and hopefully it's something that will grow and be quite successful.
It's a tricky one, this, because we don't want to get pigeonholed into a specific kind of project, but we obviously have a reputation that we are gaining for ourselves for doing a certain type of work, and that's what we're becoming well known for. So the kind of super high-end luxury projects, whether they're interiors or exteriors or both. So yeah, I mean, obviously the beautiful projects, you don't want to say no to those. I think we try to step back a little bit and get a good overview of what the project is, and it's sometimes easy to overlook who the end audience is, and you've got a lot of people that you need to make happy, whether it's the client, interior designer, or if you're trying to sell it to the public. So I think we try to step back and look at it from that angle, to work out how best to produce the images to sell the spaces, whatever it is we need to do, whether we can go really atmospheric and arty or whether it needs to be a bit more commercial. So we try to plan that. So there's a bit of image planning at the beginning. There's a lot of time spent on compositions right at the start of the project. Once we've got a kind of clay model going, we spend a long time finding lots and lots of views that we internally sift through between us and say, reject this, yes, this, and good. And then we pass that to the client for their input. And it's a very collaborative process at that point, because I think it has a huge effect down the line on the project if you spend a good amount of time on those viewpoint compositions.
And there's a process of talking with the client, pushing your ideas to the client, making sure they're on board with it. And then at that stage, pretty much just setting up the compositions and making sure we've covered all aspects of what we want to achieve.
I think one of the most challenging things these days is in dealing with the fact that the industry has moved on a bit, and some clients are still working in a certain way that was very popular for a long time and has kind of moved on a bit. And it's up to us to guide them through that process and try and help them understand that things are done in a slightly different way these days for their benefit. And that can be tricky. It's a careful balance you have to strike, and we obviously have a very good relationship with our clients, and it's that's a tricky one to kind of guide them through. Lighting, it's probably the most creative process. I think modelling, obviously you're modelling someone else's design. There's not a huge amount of creativity you can put into that. It's a kind of technical process. Whereas with lighting, there is more creativity involved in how you tackle that, especially time of day, atmosphere, mood. There's an awful lot of bit like an architectural photographer, when you go down to the site has a huge impact on how the photos turn out. It's the same with CG.
My favourite part of the process would probably be as soon as the modelling's finished, setting up compositions, exploring the space and seeing in my head what the final view could be. There's a long way between there and the final image, but for me this is the most exciting.
It depends on the project, but I think typically we work in a very modular way. We try to get the architecture up to a certain point so that once you start going through the compositional process, you don't then suddenly find that there's something missing in the shot that you should have taken into account. So we'll try to get each stage up to a certain level, and it's probably the same for materials and lighting. I think we like to get up to a point where things are looking good as quickly as possible so that you can start finding those views and making things work. But we're not afraid to obviously go back and revisit things. I mean, that's the nature of every project. You know, the designer, the architect, whoever it might be, is going to change things, and you need to jump back and start changing fundamental parts of the images, whether you want to or not.
Well, we split the projects. I mean, okay, currently we're working on the same project, so we handle different aspects of it based on how busy we are. So typically, if I was running the project, I would do it to the point of setting up the compositions and signing off those viewpoints. Then Alex might take over and continue that, light it, texture it, and it would be the same and vice versa if it was Alex's project that he was managing.
We try to find something different to do in each project, whether it's a slightly quirky camera angle or just a different take on something, a bit of an unusual time of day maybe, or even different season on an image. Typically a project could run for 2, 3, 4 months, even longer. Lots of projects disappear and come back again as redesigns happen. That's inevitably part of the process. So we try to use that downtime to look at other viewpoints and different ways we could tackle the same project so that we're fresh when it comes back into the studio.
A typical project might last a few months, and we experiment a lot within the project, mainly at the beginning with cameras, and this is the really exciting point, discovering where the images might go, where the project might go, and then there's the long process of working on maybe a set of 10 images of an apartment block, for instance, and then it also gets exciting at the end when you see the final result. The way to keep it exciting would be within that time we might revisit older projects with newer technology and see just exactly what we can gain from that. See how the results might have been slightly different, or if we can just rediscover different views.